Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Dave Jooste. I'm the president of the MSP Association of America. And today we have an amazing guest, Roman from CAB. Roman, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
All right, so we're going to get into a whole lot of stories today. But before we get into a few of those stories, give us a bit about your background, who you are, and what the company is all about.
Sure. Again, thanks for having me. So it's a great question to start us off. And really, what is our story? Really, our story starts before even the cab as a brand existed. Our founders back in the late '90s were technologists first, ran an MSP shop themselves, and early 2000s they built their own hosting business. And they're not the kind of people who accepted the status quo, Dave. Always questioning, that mindset of always questioning what doesn't make sense and really focusing on building something that's a little bit better that's out there. And then that's when they started looking something seriously at something that, they could build and it actually makes a difference. And they always kept coming back to the MSP. And that wasn't by accident, Dave. The MSP is actually the one that's closest to the real customer. They live the day-to-day reality. They're the ones who make the technology work. They're the ones who support it. They're the ones who stand behind it, and they're the ones who protect the relationship. So to us, when we built it, we really wanted to build something practical for that MSP. But we didn't just assume that the problem was there. We actually went out on a listening tour. Late 2010s, our founders went on a tour across all of North America, attending ASCII events, Channel Pro events. That's actually where we met most of our great partners and built those great relationships. And those conversations validated a few things for us. And that, the cloud industry was not really built for the MSP. The frustration around the lack of support,
Yeah.
deployment complexity, unpredictability in terms of billing and pricing. All of that validated what we already knew that, there's a ton of cloud players out there, but there isn't really one that's really focused on the MSP. And that mattered to us because, we always respect builders. MSPs are builders.
Sure.
That's really how, CAP came about.
All right, so you gave us a lot of information there. Let's kind of break this down a little bit. Okay, very first, the name CAB. Now I say CAB, you say CAB. It's CAAB, right? What does
Correct.
that really stand for, or is that really the name?
It's cloud as a business. So really the whole point is helping the MSP
Okay.
monetize this cloud that that and
Yep.
create margins, create that recurring revenue for themselves.
Okay, so that makes complete sense now. Now that you said what you said a few minutes ago. All right, and then you said a whole bunch of things regarding the opening and what the company is and what it does. Before we get into that, tell us a bit about you.
Well, before I
Not to throw you under the bus there, right?
yeah, well, yeah, it kind of threw me off there, but I guess what a little bit about me. First of all, I'm a father of two great kids, both teenagers. My daughter's in university, my son's finishing high school, and my kids inspire me every day, push me, to do better and be the best version of myself, and that's the mindset I carry day to day at work as well. So many years ago, when I started first in technology sales as an individual contributor, started working for a telco giant in Canada, Rogers Communications. One of the first clients or prospects I called into was an accounting shop. And, I tried to understand their needs. I tried to help them out, see if I can propose a better solution. And he goes, gee, Roman, I wish I could help you, but I've got Peter. And Peter's looking after all of that. Why don't you give him a call? So I called Peter, and I'm like, "Hey, Peter, I spoke with with this accountant, and he told me you're looking after him." And I realized Peter is an MSP. And back then, honestly, I come from a finance background. I didn't really know what an MSP was, who they are, what they do, and I had this sort of epiphany moment. I'm like, "Oh my God, I've got this client who's supposed to be really a client, who's underserved. Peter
Sure.
has no connections at Rogers. He doesn't have a sales rep he can call on to. Peter's got many of those accounting shops that he's looking after, and he's got nowhere really to go to really get the service, to really get serviceability checks and so on. And I'm like, oh my God, like Peter's right there. I got to build on that. And really, that became my secret sauce, working with the MSP, not around the MSP, trying to sell with them and not around them. And, almost, 2 decades later, I'm here at Cab, and, that kind of stuck with me, working along with the MSP to deliver holistic solutions to the end users because they're the ones who actually matter. They're the ones who are in front of the customer. They're the ones who put their reputation on the line when they're delivering that solution.
So I love the story, and I love the title that you have under your name, sales leader. You and I spoke briefly, and we actually spoken quite a lot actually, but you mentioned in a discussion with me previously, you don't like the typical titles like sales director, sales leader. How does that play into your role with CAB?
Honestly, I look at it, from a perspective of, I try to lead by example with my team
Sure.
and our partners, and obviously it comes from the family, from with my kids as well. I'm here to help my team. I'm here to help my partners. I'm here to help the business, and lead by example. Try to think strategically about some opportunities. Try to help our partners win some of those deals, and try to help my team grow and become the best versions of themselves day in day out. And that goes beyond titles, right? Like it's you either got it or you don't. So, and that's kind of what I
Okay.
try to live by.
Makes sense. All right, let's jump into the company here for a few minutes.
Sure.
So you said that CAB is the cloud provider for MSPs. Now, for those of you who don't know, MSPs managed service provider. And you said MSPs are at the forefront of many of these technologies going out to clients, right? What that means, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, like what that means is that managed service providers are deploying a lot of these resources for companies across the nation, across the world, actually. Okay, hence why I see your flag in the back there. You have locations all over the place, right? So you said that CAB is the cloud provider for managed services. Explain to me a little bit by what you mean by that.
Great question. Well, we're like you said, we're built for the MSP, and we built around the very specific needs that the MSP has. You've got all these different cloud providers that are out there to cater to everyone's needs, but the MSP has very specific needs, and they're different from everyone else's. It's think about it this way. You've got a family with 3, 4 kids. You're not gonna go buy yourself a sports car. You're probably gonna go look for something that will meet the needs that you have. So for us, that means, having great margins, industry-leading margins, giving our MSPs the white label capability, providing them with 24/7 support, real human 24/7 support, not tiered approaches and so on. But most importantly, Dave, is removing the complexity of cloud. And if you allow me, I'll expand a little bit more on that. Cloud
Sure.
over the last few years has gotten this extremely, bad rep around complexity and cost. And that really what separates us from a lot of the other players. Um, think about it this way. We'll take cost as an example. Cloud billing got so complicated that there's an entire industry that was created, FinOps, right, that is there to manage those costs. And just think about how absurd that is, that you've got this problem and that sort of necessitated a whole new industry just to address that problem. Like I'm still thinking about it, and every time I think about it, it really does not make sense. You look at some other players and the complexity of deployment, the different naming conventions, the different tiers, the different options of deploying. By the time you figure out what you need to deploy, you're kind of questioning, hey, like, am I even on the right track? So with us, in terms of cost, there's only one tier. It's predictable, it's transparent. Our partners know what they're going to pay at the end of the month. In terms of deployment, they pick the resources they need, the amount of CPUs they need, the amount of memory, the amount of storage. and after the races to go. Simple as that. No need to no need to scroll through, pages and pages of different menu items that you're like you need almost a rocket science degree to figure those naming conventions and those different options that are available. And lastly, it's around support, Dave, which is
Yeah.
super important specifically for the MSP, because the MSP has that client on the other end that's looking for solutions, that's looking to solve their problems. And if the MSP can't pick up the phone and call someone and have their issues resolved, then you can't really address that need, right? So that's why we don't hide behind, tiered support models. All of our partners can pick up the phone 24/7, 365, and get a live human agent on the phone to help them sort through any issues that they encounter.
Okay, so let's break this down even more. So you talk about cloud solutions. Now, I think the pricing part, we all agree with you. You know, when people talk about cloud, they automatically think of Google and Microsoft. That's it. All right. And everyone knows that trying to figure out the pricing or the cost or the payments with a Microsoft account or sometimes even a Google account is a nightmare. Um, I think we all know that. So what you're telling me and what you're saying is that CAB essentially is a cloud provider, like a Microsoft or a Google if you want, but you simplify all of the troubles and all of the difficulties that those providers have done, and you go a step further where you're now offering the telephone in-person support, which I'm telling you, I was on a call with Microsoft for the last 5 days, and to try and get hold of someone was a nightmare. Um, but what you're saying is that you've eliminated that. You've eliminated the need to do an online chat. You've now incorporated the one-to-one telephone communication and support with these MSPs for a cloud environment. Is that about right?
100%. And
Okay.
again, we're not selling to everyone, right? We know
Sure.
our lane, we stay in our lane, and we cater directly and specifically to the MSP for that reason, to make
Okay.
it simple, transparent, and support it at 24/7, 365.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, and I don't want to surprise you with this question here, but Microsoft, Google, even Amazon AWS is kind of what most people refer to, right? So what makes you guys different from those providers?
Well, those providers really came around to, to cater to the mass, right? To
Okay.
cater to the mass. And then with years, they've created partner programs and this and that just to see if they can, take whatever they have and just deliver it to as many people, as many use cases as they possibly can. We shy away from that. We know we're
Okay.
not for everyone. We don't go to the directly to the end user. We've never tried to go to directly to the end users. That's not what we're all about. We're specifically are catered to the MSP, and and I'm not trying to bash anyone. And those guys,
Sure.
obviously they have their own use cases, and it's almost $1 trillion industry, and largely because of AWS and Azure. So, and they're doing some great things, but they're doing it for the enterprises, they're doing it for
Yeah.
large scale deployments, and not really doing it for that MSP that needs a partner, really a partner on their side to deliver a solution to their small and mid-sized end user client.
All right. Let me start going into closing. We're coming up on time here, but let me start going to closing. So if I had to come to you and say, Roman, give me one of your product offerings as that is the top tier service that me as an MSP can come to you for, what would that be?
It would be our high performance infrastructure. Uh,
Okay.
unlike unlike our competition. And again, I could talk about probably 15 different things around migration, support, complementary migration, 24/7 support, dedicated account managers, and so on and so forth. But the most important part is we only have one tier for our infrastructure, and it is the best tier and the most recent tier. Our infrastructure gets upgraded every 18 to 24 months. We don't move it down tiers like some of the other players do. That's why they've got 1,000 different
Yeah.
flavors nowadays with all the years of upgrading. It's always the same. And And one of the first things that a new partner that gets to test drive our equipment and test drive our environment in once we provide them with demo access, the first thing we hear from them is, holy, like you guys just blow it out of the water. Like the performance is top notch, day in, day out. And that's what we take pride mostly.
Okay, so you say that, which is great. I love to hear it. But something that's happening here in a month or so is you're going to be hosting an actual webinar with the MSPA where you're actually going to show this, correct?
Yes, we've got a webinar in what 3 weeks from now,
Yeah,
and we'll talk
about this.
about we'll talk about the economics of cloud specifically, but we'll also touch on performance and infrastructure and really best practices for the MSP.
All right, so let's drop a little piece of candy or something, a little bit of sugar for some of our viewers here. So, what are you actually going to be demoing in that webinar?
Uh, the cloud industry is almost $1 trillion industry. We're a couple
Sure.
years away from $1 trillion. It's growing at about 18 to 20% based on the latest reports I've been reading. So
Sure.
we're probably a couple of years away from $1 trillion. The opportunity for the MSP here is tremendous. A lot of the MSPs, and that's one of the first feedbacks we've got, was that they shied away from cloud. They didn't really want to touch cloud because of the complexity. What we're going to be talking about is, hey, there is a huge opportunity here for the MSP, not only to deliver great services to their clients, but also start making recurrent revenue that is industry leading and honestly unheard of.
Okay. Well, folks, if you are watching, so that webinar is coming. Check out the MSPA LinkedIn page. Go register for that webinar, and let's see what Roman delivers. All right, Roman, we're up on time here. But before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to have any closing comments that you would like to say. So why don't you take us to the end there?
Appreciate it, Dave. First of all, thanks again for having me. Cab is really building something different in the space, and I'm proud to be a part of that company that really puts the partners first and gives them a real opportunity to grow. So, I really appreciate the opportunity to share a story with your audience, and then I'm looking forward to, take this a little bit deeper in a few weeks when we host the webinar and talk about the economies of cloud.
All right, Roman, where can people find you? I know your
Uh,
website's down below, but where else?
Cab.cloud. That's the place, sir.
Okay. And if someone wants to reach out to you directly,
My phone number, my mobile is always available. Canadian number, but nowadays it doesn't really matter across North America.
yeah,
416-312-1055, always available to speak to partners.
awesome. Roman, thanks for joining us. Thanks for this highlight into CAB. I'm super excited for the webinar because I really want to see what the platform looks like as well. So that's going to be really exciting. But thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you having me. Cheers.
All right, everyone. Thanks a lot. See you soon. Have a great day. Bye bye.